Ooh, live streaming.
It's starting to go. So anybody that can bring it up in YouTube, that would be great. I want to see if I can see any of the chat questions or not. Let's see.
Is there a time limit for your live stream?
Oh, Hilda already said hello. I've got it over here and I see it. So thank you. All right. Yeah, it looks like it's working pretty good. So what I can do is keep us in this gallery view, or you want to do like, let's see here. See what this looks like.
You're gonna put us in a classroom again.
No, this one should be cool. Hold on. I think this will be a cool one. We'll see if we're a little early anyway before starting, but let's see how this works. All right. What do you think of this? So what we should do is have some Axpona.
I'm crooked in my seat here. See, there we go.
Yeah. So we'll go back to normal view, but we'll throw this in a little bit. All right. So yeah, I wanted to just get with you guys as well as let some of the other members get in on it here in chat, but also put this on the public with live trying this for the first time. Giving other people a chance to ask about Axpona, both my coverage and review part one, and then getting you guys formal feedback. We did a little preview while at Weber Grill on that first night or second night. But as a show as a whole, I thought it'd be good to get you guys your impressions and sharing. So maybe we'll start off with you, Doug. What were your thoughts?
Well, that was the first year I'd actually been to Axpona. I've been to other audio shows, never quite made it to that particular one. And I was pleasantly surprised. It was a great time. I thought it would be really, really crowded. And I guess it's just a big venue. There were certainly times getting in and out of an elevator was a little crowded, but for the most part, you were able to get in rooms that you wanted to get into and listen. And sometimes you had to go a little earlier than others if you wanted to, for instance, listen to Magico speakers and things of that nature. But I was pleasantly surprised of the whole experience. I thought in many of the rooms, the acoustics were, good enough, and got a real good taste of all the different speakers that we wanted to listen to and the new technologies that are out there. And certainly the after hour stuff was fun. The dinners were fantastic. That's what people, sometimes don't realize. It's more than just going and listening to audio. You meet new friends. I certainly did that, and certainly enjoyed the evenings out, the dinners, the lunches, and things of that nature.
Yeah. So one thing I know you and Pete, the Greek, hit it off well.
Yeah. Great guy. Yep.
Yeah. In fact, I talk to him fairly regularly. He just ordered the Technique speakers that I've always been touting. He got that today, as well as the Kabas speakers. Did he text you? Yeah. So it was like
he told me he had ordered that, and actually the prices that they were advertising, I think, weren't exactly what they were selling for.
Yeah, he ended up, they had him mispriced, but then he ended up getting a discount because they screwed up. And actually, Kevin Deal was there. I get confirming those prices. I've got him on video, so it's not like he's lying. But yeah, those were pretty low prices for what you were getting. So yeah, that I know that was one of your favorites as well, right?
Yeah, I think, the overall, there were some awe-inspiring speakers. The Estalon Extremes, to me, were kind of like the standout speaker. As soon as I walked into that room, number one, they're just gorgeous. And number two, just the sound of that speaker was just really, really impressive. But all the usual players were great. Acora, MBL, even Rockports were great. I really enjoyed some of the big rooms, even though the acoustics in those rooms weren't ideal. But kind of the takeaway for me, and this kind of piggybacked off the Florida show, of the small speakers really putting out great sound, and you don't have to spend a ton of money on big floor standing speakers to get fantastic sound. I think, with room correction technology, some of these smaller speakers that have pretty decent range on them, if you add a subwoofer to that, I just found that, man, you could really get a very, very good system for easily under $10K. And in some of these systems, like we were looking at, more like the $2,000 to $3,000 range, you could have a very solid system, especially for an apartment or a smaller room. And that's encouraging. You hate to keep walking around looking at $200,000 speakers every room. It's fun to do, but it's not, realistic for most people. So yeah, I really like the Cabas. I wanted to hear the Pearl speakers. I didn't hear those. But the Cabas speakers that we listened to are fantastic. And I was just really impressed. And there were multiple rooms that were like that were smaller speakers, not super expensive. And you walk in there and you're like, wow, that's pretty impressive. I really like the Magico bookshelf speakers, but those aren't necessarily cheap, but those really sounded fantastic to me.
Well, one thing I wanted to tell you guys is when I went to Los Angeles for Coachella, the day before, I went to Andrew Jones's studio in West Hollywood and got to hear the Source Points, the Source Point 8, the even smaller ones, in his actual reference room where he basically does his testing as well as measurements. And that was really cool. He's got a really sweet setup there. I'll have a video on that. But man, those Source Point 8s, which are even 1,000 less than the Source Point 10s, which Steve was there with me, Steve McCormick, and he was getting a lot of enjoyment out of the 8s, very similar to the 10s. Both of them are phenomenal. If you heard the Source Points at a show, and they are great at the show, they are even a whole nother level when you're in a room like Andrew Jones's room. You would not believe the level of disappearing act that they have in terms of, when I look at budget speakers, you can get them on the metrics to be pretty flat. A lot of objective points are going to be right up there with the cost no objects. But where they sometimes fall apart is in comparison is giving you that scale and also that disappearing act and convincing you that it's not a speaker, that it's actually music. And those Source Point 8s in Andrew Jones's room gave me that impression like no other speaker at that price point that I can recall. Again, it takes a village. It takes that room. He had very modest electronics. He was using Hi-Fi Rose for his reference room, although he's got BAT and other things too. But that was an amazing experience. On top of hearing a lot of the tricks of the trade, his measurement techniques, things that he does. I'll talk about that in that video. But the Source Point 8s, I didn't hear him at Axpona. I just had that interview with Andrew, but that was definitely now a takeaway of, if you need a speaker under 5K, that's Source Point 8 or 10. And another thing to let people know about, I'm even looking at this myself, they come in that white and black now, and you can turn them on their side for center channel, and it's coming out with a stand adapter to kind of orientate them, give a little bit of a ledge so that the tweeter axis and everything, when you turn it on its side, is matched up identically to if it was standing up. So there's a lot of cool things still coming down the path. And the next progression, in my opinion, he didn't confirm this or deny it, but the thing that makes sense is for them to do a sub next, because the only thing left really with that speaker is the last octave. So, and now they've got different finishes. Yeah, Andrew Jones was super impressive, and he earned that legendary status. He already had that with me, but after this weekend being at his place, yeah, it was incredible.
I enjoyed that interview you had with him where he was talking about how he basically almost to scale brought everything down 80%, but then even adjusted some things internally. And the reason why he did that is he kept hearing people walking in saying, "Ooh, that speaker's kind of big." It kind of surprises them because they see it in the magazines and it looks like a tiny little speaker. And it's not. I actually heard both of them. So I got to hear both, and they were both fantastic. I mean, I would lean slightly towards the 10s if you can swing that in the, size room. But yeah, it's just a fantastic sounding speaker for the price. It's a great bang for the buck, no doubt.
I actually tried to buy off it. He's made one Source Point 10 in the white and black. which is my favorite color. It matches in the back. So he's only made one. The Source Point 10 does not come in the white yet. The Source Point 8 does. And he's not sure if they're going to do the Source Point 10 in the white, but he had one in his demo room, and I tried to buy it off of him. So I'm going to have to bribe him even more. It would match perfectly, and I could get rid of that Maggie Center channel in the future. So, but anyway, let me jump in. Dave is over here. He's going to start doing yoga if we don't talk to him.
Dancing around.
Dave, you did a good job filming a lot of rooms that I couldn't go to. And actually, I intentionally, if I saw you videoed them, I'd probably steer clear of them unless it was a major room like PS Audio. Maybe talk about some of your favorite rooms.
Sure. What's that?
Somebody
in the background there.
I had to mute. Yeah. I had to mute some guy. Okay.
What I enjoyed was Doug mentioned the people, and that's what the big show like this is all about. I mean, it was my first time getting a chance to meet Steve McCormick. I ran into him early on, and then with going out to dinner, our own group, probably meeting Rex, and Bob, and of course Jonathan was there too. And it's quite an eclectic group, it's colorful people, and that always makes it for me. And it's not just our own group, but I was looking at, Eric was there now, Eric Watson, he's been having health issues, with working with Charles Kermous, and he's been out for a while, and just being able to see him out and around and having fun, that was good. It's always good to see Eric. And my first chance to get to know Edgar, from Breakdown.
Right. And you helped him break down the room. Yeah. And now he wants you to come to Munich as well.
But
so Edgar was a great guy. That was actually both of your first chances to listen to the Bach. Now, Doug had put one on order. And you got to see just the challenge of the Bach. I guess you guys noticed this as well, is that the center seat is obviously the one that gets calibrated and people want to get. But I just noticed we constantly had to encourage people to rotate out of that, unlike any other room at the show where people, it's musical chairs pretty quickly. It was a little bit tough to get as many people as we wanted in there, but what were your general impressions?
I loved it. My first time listening to it was actually the center seat behind the first seat. And in that seat, you can get a good bit of what's going on. You get a flavor of what's to come when you get into that, the front seat. And now there are good systems that can approach that second seat. I believe mine does here at home. I'm fortunate where I'm in that position. But once you get in the front seat, though, you can see how that wrap around the sidewalls just keeps continuing back towards you as a listener. And it was nice to hear just normal, real music, what it does for that. Not music that it's gimmicky, that has special effects, or Q sound stuff. I mean, anyone could do a Q sound recording like that. But when you get a normal recording to sound like it's Q sound, that's quite special. And it doesn't alter the recording. It doesn't alter what you would normally hear. It just, it widens it a little bit, and it brings it closer to you on the sides,
It was surprising to me it was surprising to me on songs, Madonna, Led Zeppelin. I mean, how the Bach even worked on those recordings, really separating out things that you're just not used to hearing. And what I'm excited about, just like, anyone that gets a new set of speakers or new amplifiers, kind of going through my music collection and listening to it like it's the first time again. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's really going to be a lot of fun. And unfortunately with the Bach, I think that, people walking in the room that weren't really familiar with it, they would stand in the back of the room and listen to the speakers and say, oh, this sounds fine. And they'd walk out. They have no idea what it was that they were supposed to do. And that is wait your turn and get in one of those center seats. And I'm not sure what the good solution to that is, have a sign up or whatever. I don't know. I mean, but you're right. People were enjoying it so much that they were sitting in that seat for 30 minutes, 45 minutes. And there's only so long that someone's going to sit there and tolerate it. Maybe just have look, you can sit here for one song or one experience, and then you got to rotate out.
Two songs of different, genre or something. And I agree. I agree.
But one thing, you brought up a good point, because Axpona last year, I did go into Edgar's room, but I sat on the side and I was like, okay, because actually Carl from 3MA told me, you got to go in this room, but he didn't tell me you have to sit in the middle. So I just went in there briefly, went to the side, and said, oh, it sounds good, but he talked about being a physicist, and it just went over my head, and I left not really ever having digested it. And then at Capital Audio Fest is when Pete the Greek pulled me in there. He said, you've got to hear this. Mm-hmm. And so I got in the center, and then he gave me the iPad where I could A/B it, turn it on and off. And that's when I was like, whoa. And I was doing it on recordings like you talking about, Hotel California, stuff that I'm not gimmicky stuff, although the gimmicky stuff is cool. Mm-hmm. But that is where I was like, this is a game changer. This is something that we've been just listening to a collapsed sound stage and this crosstalk for too long. And Doug, you'll know that both you and I kind of had a taste of this technology back with the Polk SDA L800 at Rocky Mountain in 2018 or 19. And that was a standout room.
Crazy. Yeah, we were like looking around like, what was that? Like you could hear the sound stage was so far. You're like, that's crazy. And that's the same exact thing. They just had like a little divider technology instead of, using it like Edgar does. So that was the first taste of it. So that was really, really cool.
Yeah. So I've always been lusting after that speaker and getting that level of performance, but I didn't realize that Edgar had come up with a far more advanced solution, head tracking, in-ear miking, all kinds of stuff that really took it to a next level. And like you say, helps on every recording. The Polk SDA requires setup of the speakers in a certain way, a room, and certain tracks still didn't do it right, and it doesn't track your head. So this is a whole nother level that blew me away, which, I'm glad at least some people got to experience it. One thing, I don't know, were y'all in the room when we did the test where we turned the hotel room into a recording studio? Because the one thing that people wonder is this real or fabricated? And so what we did on the last day, and I went live with this briefly, is that just a random guy in there, I wanted to show this live, where Edgar put the mics in his ear and he would talk to him at 12 o'clock, 9 o'clock, 6 o'clock, 3 o'clock, and then whisper in his ear, recording this with the mics instead of the test tones. And then he took out the mics and played it back on the main speakers so that you could hear now with the Bach filter on that when you hear something behind you, you were just present and you heard that is where it is. It's not fabricating anything. What it's really doing is just revealing more of those spatial cues that we weren't present for the recording. We didn't know were there. Now we know they're there, and it's not fake or gimmicky. So I think that was very telling. But at a show condition with people coming in and out, only a few people, unfortunately, each day, 5 songs apiece. I think people at minimum 15, 20 minutes were in there.
Well, it took that one gentleman that was listening, I think it was Uma Guma, Pink Floyd, that he thought a fly was actually in his ear, that he jumped up out of the chair. Maybe that's what you need to play to get people to move out.
Yeah, exactly. You need to do that more often. Parth, my friend Parth, who came and visited, had that same experience. So, Dave, in terms of rooms, what rooms stood out for you?
Okay. Now, rightly or wrongly, I think a lot of us, we generally associate the room with what speaker is in it. And actually, it's what's behind the speaker. It's who sets the room up. It's so many things, to come together for that. But we think of, at least I do. I always say, oh, yeah, I was in, such and such room. But like you fellas, the Cabas room, that little system for 4,000 or whatever it was supposed to be for, that includes everything. All you need is supply a source. I thought that was a stunner. Now, it's not refined, it's not a refined audiophile type sound that we're used to, but, for the money, it's outstanding. When you start moving up a little bit, like you're talking about the MO5s, the source point 10s and the 8s, which I didn't have a chance to hear the 8s, but that is also, like you said, a very inexpensive speaker that is refined, that gets you that sound. And another one in that category is that speaker in the Odyssey room. Now, he called it the Kismet, but he uses Kismet as a way of, it's like the upgraded version of different components he has, like it's their top stuff. That might be the Lorelei Kismet version. But those speakers, that entire room, every year with Klaus as master of ceremonies, it doesn't get better than that. You know, I mean, it's stunning, stunningly real. And for me, I didn't want to talk about things that had potential, because when you say that, you're saying, given some circumstances that were different, if this was different, the room was different, this such and such could probably be a great thing. I'm narrowing what I'm going to talk about down to the rooms that actually did it, actually pulled it all together and just made it happen and made it work. There's a lot fewer of those. And it's not that the other rooms were bad. A lot of them were extremely good. An example of that, well, some of the boxes that I need to check for me, you mentioned Disappearing Act. I mean, that's number one for me. And for me, that happens when the soundstage begins about at the speaker plane and extends behind the speaker, wraps to each corner wall on each side wall, and then starts to wrap back to envelop you. That is my idea of a soundstage presentation. Then within that soundstage, all the images are delineated very well in precise location in space and depth. And they're not hazy, you know. I want to talk about the MBL room, which I love this year. It was the same room they had last year. It's the same room. They had it set up the same way, where the 126s in the smaller part were playing the same music as the 101s in the front, which was great because you can go back and forth between rooms and compare. And I thought that was great. As great as the MBL room I thought it was, it didn't check that one box for me. It wasn't what it was in Tampa. The MBL room in Tampa had it all, had absolutely everything, but it did not have the imaging for me this year or last year. You know, and Jeremy is one hell of a setup person. I mean, he knows what he's doing. And that kind of tells me the MBLs, in order to get greatness, takes a lot of work, a lot of painstaking work. I think it's but it's easy to get them to sound really, really good. But to get what Tampa had, that must be something very special there. You know, I enjoyed the 126s in that room. On Right Music, they had what I was looking for. Of course, they don't have the low end, that sort of thing, but you put something like that with a distributed bass array, probably like the MoFi Source Point 8, maybe with a distributed bass array. And like you said, you can have the whole package, you know.
Yeah, you bring up a point about MBLs. They radiate sound everywhere, so it's even more difficult to set up a room because every surface is basically a reflective part of that presentation. So yeah, kudos to Jeremy. He usually gets a high bar in almost every room. But yeah, the Tampa room won a lot of hearts and minds because he was able to, and that wasn't even the same room he used the year before. But yeah, he brings a lot of treatment and always hits a high bar with those MBO.
And the thing is, he was coming off being king of the mountain, coming just like the Acora room, the big Acoras, you know, they were both top show in as far as I'm concerned in Tampa. And then to come here, two rooms they're not used to. Well, at least Jeremy was used to that room, but just try to meet and match what they had. I think it's so much harder to stay on top than it is to reach and try to get there. But when you're already there, the slightest thing, you know, can knock you back off again. What else? I thought I mentioned that most people think of speakers when they think of a room. And Klaus had told me that story. I don't know if he had told you about that, but he doesn't want to be a speaker manufacturer. He didn't want anything to do with it. But when he started in the business, started putting out his amplifiers, what he noticed at these different audio shows, what reviewers and people were talking about were the speakers that were in the room, not what was behind them. And so he says, if I'm going to get recognition, I need to start putting on my own speaker line. And then that name Odyssey is going to be out there because people are going to be calling the room by the speakers that are in it. And that was his whole reason for doing it. And then it ended up being really successful. People actually really started to like him, and now we can't get out of it. So, but
yeah, he plus the theory that you should put your money in your speakers over everything else. I generally recommend that.
Yeah.
But he consistently has his speakers at a much lower price point, at least in this room, especially,
Oh, yeah.
than the source material. And they are not embarrassed in the least. In fact, they probably still are one of the strengths.
What were they, around 4K maybe?
Yeah, he used to put together an entire system. His rooms used to be under 10 grand. He'd have a banner he'd bring to every show, and everything you could buy in that room was under 10 grand. Now, since the Capitol and here, he's done much higher with the turntable, tone arms and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But,
And bringing the symphonic line in too. Yeah.
The symphonic stuff. But yeah, he does do a great job of setting up in a small room. And that's why he got, the kudos I gave him at the end, because level of performance with the difficulty he faced, everybody complains about the rooms, except for Edgar, but everybody complained about the rooms at Axpona. But he legitimately had the smaller one. And he'll say, this is not right. I got this dresser in the way, but he'll make it disappear. And so he's the kind of guy that you want to get tips on. Most people's rooms are not perfect. Most people's rooms are smaller than the big cavernous rooms you hear at the shows. So somebody like Klaus is one to pick your brains and look and see what he's doing at the first reflection point. Same thing with Edgar. He just brought 4 room treatments, and he was getting XTC values that were incredible. His measurements were incredible in that room. He was happy as could be with the room, while everybody else was, making excuses. So yeah, Klaus definitely deserved one of my best of shows. What about you, Doug? Did you have another? I don't think you went into. You went into Odyssey, but you had to leave.
I had to leave. I had to catch a flight, but I enjoyed the room. I thought it was a cool setup. I thought it sounded great. Enjoyed what that guy had to say. It was a lot of fun. I would ditto what Dave says. I think a lot of people don't realize the work that goes behind the scenes to this. I mean, when you really pay attention and you're looking up, and they have pillows in the rafters of the room because of just how bad the acoustics are when they're first setting it up, and all the time. And Jeremy with MBL, I mean, he's got the ferns and he's got all the different stuff trying to remove all the bad parts of the room. It really does separate the men from the boys, the people that really know what they're doing and spend the time doing it. It makes a big difference, because I have heard great speakers sound terrible at those shows. And like you've talked about on your channel, you try not to judge that just based on the room. But I think if you have someone that takes the time setting it up properly, it really can make a big difference. And I think that a lot of these smaller bookshelves, like when we had Joseph Audio at the Tampa show, it's just like, wow. I mean, you walk in there and it really, when it's set up correctly, it really stands out compared to the other rooms that we were in. I liked many different speaker systems. I was blown away by some more than others. But I was like most surprised, I guess, by this, again, the smaller speakers and how much sound and lower end they were putting out, for the price points that they were at. I think that was sort of the biggest takeaway for me. If I had a new audiophile friend or somebody just trying to set up an apartment, and if they're looking at these big floor standing speakers, I would really try to kind of direct them more to a bookshelf, maybe get a sub, if they can swing something like the Acoras, great, but man, I've just heard these smaller speakers just blow me away with the detail and a very decent frequency range that they go. And if you feel like you need that visceral oomph, you could always just, dial in a sub. And I think you'd pretty much be there with some of the top systems, out there at a fraction of the cost.
And that was another thing that got debuted, was the new Magico sub, which I did the site visit there. They have a massive sub, which is killer, kind of based on the old Krell double driver dipole type sub, which is massive. In fact, my friend in Sacramento, Robert, owns one of the old legacy Krell ones, but that new one by Magico is incredible. But they were showcasing a totally new one, and I would have loved to hear that with their bookshelves. I know that Alon wasn't big on doing bookshelf satellite, but I think those monitors that you make stand mounts go pretty low, and you put a nice sub with that. That's killer. And like we talked about with JR, talking about bass bass arrays and being able to launch bass from different parts of the room is certainly advantageous than sometimes these massive speakers where all the bass drivers are attached or, in line with these other drivers when it really doesn't need to be. In fact, you're just creating more vibrations in that cabinet, and what's usually best for a mid-range and tweeter location in the room sometimes isn't the best for the bass. And so, yeah, more and more people should look at that option. And so, again, things like the Cabas and smaller ones like the Joseph, pairing it with a sub, if you know how to mate them properly, you've got world-class performance that can exceed some of these monstrosities with big bass drivers everywhere.
And even some of the smaller, thinner, lower profile speakers. I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right, but Bonaki or
a little tiny, like a midget speaker. Yeah.
I think I have a picture of it.
Bonaki, B-O-N. You got a picture of it?
I think so. Let's see if I can try to get this.
I think you also have some, you like that Clarisis speaker too, open baffle, apogee.
Oh yeah, I like that.
Yeah, that thing it looks bigger in this picture than it was, but it was like knee high.
Yeah, that was so impressive, and I'm like, man, you put that just in a next to a dresser or something, you hardly see the thing, and the amount of sound coming out of the speaker was impressive. My only disappointment on this speaker, because when I saw the speaker and heard the speaker, I was excited about maybe I'll get this as a second, because I was between the Cabas and maybe just something a little bit more lower profile. I don't remember the exact price on this, but I think it was over 10 grand. And so that was a little bit, whoa, because if this thing would have been like in that 5 to 6 range, I think this would have been a steal for that with the sound it was putting out. But yeah, there's lots of options like that. I liked, again, these aren't cheap speakers, but the Borison room I thought sounded as good or better than I've ever heard those speakers sound in the big room that they had downstairs. I think it was the 03. I don't know all the different models. I think they were doing the 03 speakers, but they play a lot of,
280,000, I think.
Yeah, I think maybe 90, 93. I don't know, somewhere. It's not those speakers aren't cheap, but they are beautiful to look at, and they sound.
Ask for the show discount with them.
Yeah, I mean, but they play some Swedish electronica and stuff that I'm not familiar with, but it sounds fantastic. But the one thing I really liked about that room, they're playing all this music I wasn't really familiar with, but it sounded fantastic. It just huge dynamic range, and then all of a sudden, Jimi Hendrix, out of the blue, Jimi Hendrix. I was like getting ready to walk out of the room, and I just sat right back down, and it was really, really enjoyable. So that was a treat as well. But yeah,
Doug, you were with me. We went to the Sienna room together.
Yes.
See, yes. That's one of my top rooms. That one and the Acora room again. But that Sienna room every year consistently.
That room was pretty crazy. They were playing Yellow, one of the songs from Yellow, and it was like race cars zooming around, and it literally sounded like you were standing in the middle of a race car track with these things zooming around. It was a pretty impressive wall of sound. I guess my only problem with that room is I didn't listen to a lot of real detailed music. To judge it, but as far as the wow factor of really punchy bass and great dynamics, that was impressive.
I didn't go into that room this year, but it was the same room they had last year. I'm familiar with it. Did they bring the one with the mother of pearl finish?
Yes, they did.
Beautiful. That is a beautiful finish.
And they had a stack of 8 subs this year.
Yeah,
and that was incredible. Usually they do 1 sub each, but they had.
And it was only like 150,000. It was a bargain.
They were using the same subs that High Fidelity Cables used to use last year. Is it Scana? How do you even pronounce it?
Sienna? I don't know.
Sienna? I don't know. But in any case, I don't know what happened to High Fidelity Cables. They've been off the map for a while.
And Jason, what about some of the cables that we saw, like the Clarisis cables?
Let's see. Oh, that was a Shunyata.
Oh, Shunyata, yeah.
Oh, maybe.
The Clarisis, the speakers.
Wow. The Clarisis speakers, yeah.
That's this room with just your standard cable.
Yeah. Pretty impressive looking. Well, actually, let's talk about the AB cable demo. I was very impressed that Kimber did that.
Yep.
Very rare to see any cable manufacturer do that. And usually, if I've seen it done, they'll use it to take pot shots at whoever the big brand is and show that they're better. They were doing it, being against their own models and switching it on the fly and not telling you, such that, you know, if you were hearing a difference, that was, you were natively hearing that. And so, yeah, you were pretty impressed with that, weren't you?
I loved it. If more manufacturers would do that, I really think A, it would put their money where their mouth is, and B, I think it would really help sales. I mean, I think a lot of people are still somewhat skeptical of cables. I mean, I feel they definitely make a difference. I can hear it plain as day. It's not always better, but they are different. And I think if they had a true AB like Kimber Cable did, and are saying, all right, here's your two different realms of cables. Here's what this sounds like. Here's what this sounds like. I mean, I think if they would just show and prove definitively to many audiophiles that it makes a huge difference. I mean, people would buy cables right on the spot. That sounds good. I'll take them. I think there's just a little bit of suspicion because there's a lot of snake oil out there with cables.
Right.
People are suspicious of it. But yeah, that was, I mean, kudos to them. The only complaint I had is I didn't know which cable I was listening to. So although I was definitely hearing a difference as they were switching it, number one, I think they were switching back and forth a little too quickly. I think, they should let you know when they're switching it, like here's a switch, here's a switch. But I mean, you could hear it plain as day, but at least maybe let you know which cable is which when you're listening to it, even at the end of it. So you don't, blur your A/B comparison, I guess, or your blind comparison. But I walked out of there like, yeah, those two cables sounded completely different, but I have no idea which one was which. And I don't think that they would have been able to tell me walking out which one I was listening to, at the time. I mean, they knew the two that they were testing, but at any particular point in time, I don't think that they would have been able to tell me. But I think that should be really a model for some of these other companies. Moving forward, it would be a really neat room, both with power cables and speaker cables, to really try to dial in, that A/B comparison, so people can hear that there is a significant difference with these cables. And if you're going to spend the money on it, here's proof that it makes a difference. And if it's to your ears and you like it better, then I think it would justify it a lot more, to part with your money on these things.
All right. And then speaking of which, I think you were talking about getting power cables from Inacoustic, because we got to meet the gentleman that came from Germany, Sven, from Inacoustics. We got to see the construction quality. We get to see a little bit more because, like you say, there's so many cable companies and so many of them are just doing OEM cable, putting a Furatech connector and then marking it up ridiculous amounts without the technology, without putting any kind of increased thought into the design, conductors, and everything combined, such that I'm actually going to be visiting Inacoustic when I go out to Munich for the Hi-Fi show and seeing their facility. They're one of the few companies that's been in business 40 years and sold over 15 million pieces. So very few people can tout that. So yeah, there is a lot of snake oil. There's very minor differences in a lot of cases with cables, and a lot of cases, like you talked about, you may not even like the more expensive one if you do hear a difference. So throwing a lot of money in that is not always the best route if you don't really understand the company behind it, the design, and have done these kind of testing or have people that are credible giving you that advice. So yeah, that was kind of cool. I did want to talk about transition to two rooms I think both of you went into. That was one of the big debuts at the show, other than the Estalon, was the PS Audio finally coming back to the show scene. Yep. And we had quite a few videos in there trying to get the sweet spot and getting different models of the FR 30, 20, whatnot. What were your thoughts on that, Dave? I think you went in there a few times.
I did. I thought the room as a whole was stunning, the way they had it set up. Welcome to the family. It was just, as soon as you walked in, they had a lot of displays all around the room, and it was great. And right there, we could see the FR20s, and those were the ones I was able to get the prime seat for, and I was impressed with them. I had heard the FR30s, but I wasn't the perfect seat, and I thought they sounded mighty fine as well. But I can confirm it with the FR20s, though. They image just like I would want a high-end speaker like that to image. It had the depth, it had the width, and all the spatial characteristics. In fact, so much so I had to ask if some of the music they were playing, if it was Q sound or not, or is it just
Really?
regular music? Because they were doing the Bach thing, or they're trying to. They're trying to imitate Bach, you know,
Oh,
and
well,
the theoretical physics stuff. And they were just
maybe they had one hidden.
maybe, but the FR20s, I definitely like those, and I'm sure the FR30s are great too. I can't say it because I wasn't in the right seat for it.
Got you. What about you, Doug? You got some time in there?
Yeah, I spent some time in there. I heard both of the speakers. I liked it. I thought that they were visually stunning speakers. The room was not ideal from an acoustic perspective, but I really enjoyed it. I thought the mid-range on those speakers was just gorgeous. I love the presentation of it, and I thought that was really what stood out to me. I would say the only thing that I found just a slight bit lacking was just the lower end control. But very pleasant, a fun speaker to listen to. I thought it was gorgeous. I like the imaging, like Dave was saying. I certainly it wasn't a room that I wanted to leave. I was actually enjoying listening to it, and I think that's kind of a test too. I mean, we talked about how you don't want to have people staying in the room for too long, but there are some speakers that are just easy and fun to listen to, and that I think that's more of a testament to them than anything. You can nitpick. There's this I didn't like or as much as other speakers, but again, we're talking about speakers that are $200,000 that you're kind of comparing it to, because that's on that floor. All those speakers on that floor were pricey. So no, I would be very happy with those speakers. I think they're visually stunning. It's good to see them back in the game here, and I was very impressed with them.
Yeah, I think I would echo your thoughts. I mean, passive radiator bass to me has a kind of a unique sound. That's not my favorite, but everything there sounded high quality. And so you could tell so much better, both aesthetically and sound quality, than the previous iterations that they tried back even at Rocky Mountain before they came out with this one. They were basically prototypes for 2 straight years, never went to market with that weird looking design that they first tried with servo bass and Arnie Dudell. I think this was much better, looked great, although it's still not my particular taste, but definitely good to see them back. And obviously they have electronics across the board. They're killing it sales-wise. They got rid of all their dealer network. They sell everything direct now.
I think they only had about $200,000 worth of power supply going into it.
Yeah, exactly. Regenerators everywhere.
I mean, that stack of that stuff was like, wow. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, crazy. Now, speaking of crazy, Dave, did you get a chance to see the Aries Surratt gear?
I did.
In the Wilson Benesch room. The chassis and the fact that they have usually a plexiglass cover you could see under the hood, that just is insane.
And to have Robert explain all the different parts, especially on the DAC, all the different chips working together.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, 30-something DAC, 36 DAC chips, I think, on both sides of the board. It was just a 200-pound chassis. The two combined for a DAC is just, I thought my DAC here, the stacks, was about as heavy as you can get. That thing is insane. Also, did you get to see the materials that are inside of Robert's grounding box? The one that I have.
All the crystals and all the exotic stuff.
Diamonds. He should have had a security guard there. Somebody could have just been pocketing some of those diamonds and crystals. But that was impressive, as well as Wilson Benesch being back. They did have a stand mount last year that I touted as one of the best bookshelves, quote bookshelves, at $30,000, I heard. But now they had some of their isobaric bass full floor standing ones. That's a speaker company that, like in acoustic, if you go to their facility, I'm sure you're going to be very impressed. Just like Magico, they do everything. They make their own drivers, which a lot of companies outsource that and custom, design it with somebody. But yeah, that was pretty amazing. Seeing Wilson Benesch back and that isobaric bass. They had tough rooms to set that kind of gear up with.
Still
So
sounded great. I mean, you could just tell
Yeah.
that stuff was well built, well thought out, well designed. I mean,
Yeah.
the room was not ideal at all, but you could just tell that those speakers were just on point. I mean, it was an interesting design. I've never heard them before, and very controlled dynamics. I really enjoyed sitting in there for the time we were able to and listen to those.
Yeah. Now the stand mounts they brought looked really interesting too. I would have liked to have heard those.
Yeah,
They were
those are the ones I
static in the
heard
other
last
room.
year. Yeah,
Were those the ones from last year?
I think they were. Yeah, around 30,000 or something.
No,
Maybe
these
even
are
more.
much. These are, I think, in
These
the
are
80s.
50. Okay. Okay.
I think they're in the 80s. These, yeah, because I looked them up. They're like one of the top line. Yeah.
At some point, I hope to visit their facility. In the future. That's definitely a company I'm interested in learning more about, speaker wise. And of course, Aries Sarat, I'd love to visit. Cyprus one day. I've had interviews with Stavros. That's a company that, again, when you're talking about the money that you're paying now, you want to see that level in the facility, construction, aesthetics. You want every box to be checked. And, companies like Wilson Benesh, Aries Sarat, in acoustic, that whole room had those kind of brands that check every box for that high-end experience.
I was disappointed that Spatial wasn't there this year, and that
Yeah,
Mur Audio,
Spatial and Mur
Mur
Audio
Audio
as
with their
well.
SP1s. Yeah.
Yeah, I was a fan of
I
theirs
really,
last year.
I was really looking forward to hearing those, and because I had one part of an afternoon, well, actually most of the afternoon, just doing all open baffle stuff, all panel speakers and all open baffle. The Pure Audio project, the different rooms they were in, very, very good. And the Linkwits, of course, you had to almost scout that room out early because it filled
It
up
was
quick.
full all time. I didn't get the sweet spot at all the entire time.
Yeah, I was able to do that. And in fact, people were amazed how quickly I was able to get from that back row to the front row. I only had to push down two people, and
Yeah, I
was
had to
in
give
that.
you my camera while we were in the room.
Yeah. But
It's funny, I don't have that
very
listed as it's one of the
impressive,
tops. That was good.
Now, the KLH9 was also another open baffle David Jansen did. We got to go in there before hours and before he had trouble where he had to fix one of the speakers.
Right.
But yeah, that was also cool and impressive. The only thing that was...
Most of the panel speakers, they don't do it for me like the Maggies. I listen to every Maggie I could find at the show because I want to like them. I really do. And I just can't because of how they image. Either you're listening to something where you think you're in the land of the giants because everybody is too big, too fat, too tall, or they're muffled, or everything is just too ethereal where you can't localize things enough. But yeah, the KLH9s, and I didn't know this. David told me about it. And the reason that they can pinpoint images much better is because they're designed similar to the way Quad was. Quad does their speakers, and that the panel isn't a single panel. It's like it's divided into sections, starting from the center, working outwards to the sides, and each section is on a time delay. Exactly like what Quad does, except David does it in a different way. He does it through crossover. But by doing that, they're allowed to image much better than a standard panel type speaker.
Yeah, and speaking of Maggie, though, you brought up one of the oddest moments of the show. Doug, we went in and we sat out there for a half hour waiting for the Wendell Diller presentation with his new Magnapan sub, and he had it in there with Martin Logan panels, which some people say aren't even playing, but I kind of, what a lot of people say happens in the room, he didn't even tell us, but he was just playing the subs the whole time because he's running the full range. But he either forgot or knew he couldn't say that because I asked him before the thing ever started. I said, what are you rolling off the subs in? And he went into detail talking about 6 dB slopes. Remember, Doug? Yep. I asked him ahead of time because I didn't want him to pull a fast one that he was using Martin Logan's and crossing it over. At least that's what he said to me in front. But it's either way, it's a good demo because one thing I was doing today with my system, and I talked about this in the membership chat if y'all saw it, you can do an app like Spectroid and listen to your music. A lot of music, in fact, almost all of Nora Jones that I was playing today, you're in that 300 to 600 hertz for a lot of that material. So if you run small subs, full range, almost quasi mid-range drivers, yes, it's very easy to fool people. It just sounds a little rolled off. And he was playing certain classical material where those instruments don't hit the high stuff. So, I don't know what he was trying to accomplish there. We just walked out, scratching our head. What was that all about? But I've been a fan of Maggie's. I've had Maggie's before. I think the value proposition is there, but there are definitely trade-offs depending on your taste and whatnot, and setup and stuff that you have to factor in.
I tell you, I've never had the chance to have them in my room either and work with them. So I might ask, Pepe, he's got his 1.7s, if they're still functional, might bring them over to, play with just to see if, everyone else is just doing it wrong. I don't know, but they're not doing it for me. Every place I go, they're just, that important part that I like is just not there.
Yeah, now's a good time to take a look at YouTube, because we did go live on YouTube, and Steve McCormick saying he can make a 200-pound amp with crystals in it. If I want. Should I take him up on that? He's already given me like a 50-pound DAC, that's and that's killer piece. I mean, man, I'll tell you what, guys, this cell phone captures a lot more than I ever thought once I played it through that. And a lot of these rooms where, I don't know if y'all were in there at the same time. I know Jonathan, if he was on, we were hearing distortion in a couple of rooms. It picked it up. T+A had distortion on that one trombone shorty track. Maybe a tube went bad. I don't negate. I mean, things can happen at shows, so it's not their fault. I'm sure the gear doesn't normally, or the speakers don't normally distort. There was just something going wrong. And you got to give them a pass on that. Things happen at shows. It's great gear. Same thing with Dyne Audio. Great speakers, phenomenal speakers. But clearly, when we were in that room on that track, we were hearing distortion, and it picked it up on the mic. It wasn't the mic overloading at all. But these kind of things happen. But the nuances that I heard from St. James Infirmary in the Odyssey room, which are the things that I look for best I've ever heard of that track, this picked it up, and I was able to hear it when playing through that. Phenomenal. Stack. Blue Hawaii, and I'm gonna have a separate review on this coming out shortly, but don't want to spoil that. Did want to get to, let's see, any other questions they had.
That trombone shorty track, I think it was Neff is the name of the song. I played that at home when I got home. I was like, I just want to, because I mean, it just sounded like that thing goes so low. And I played that at a fairly decent level, and it scared the hell out of me. My whole house was shaking. It's like, holy moly, does that go low?
That's a great track. Yeah, exactly. It could separate the men from the boys.
Oh, man.
And something was going on in that T+A room with that. And then, speaking of which, you're gonna have to give me you were Shazamming a lot of the songs, and like we do with every show report.
Yeah, I need to get that to you. Yep, I got a list.
Do the best tracks.
Interestingly, there were a lot of new ones, which I was excited about. Things, I mean, I recorded or Shazammed it, whether it was really my style or not. So there's going to be some other things in there, but there were some really cool tracks. Some that were a little bit more challenging to find, it's always another fun part of the show is just hearing different music that surprises you that you really like. Sometimes I'm surprised at the artist. I'm familiar with the artist, but maybe not that particular song. But no, I was looking through the list and compare that to Florida, and there's a lot of new ones. So I'll definitely get that list to you, and you can get that to your peeps, and so that they can enjoy it as well. The other thing, Jace, we got to talk about more is our dinners. We had some great dinners.
Yeah, let's talk about the fun stuff outside. I mean, like, to be honest with you, I look forward to the socializing and the fun, being with you guys as much as the rooms itself. I mean, the rooms kind of get crazy. I've heard a lot now that I've got the Bach. Most of these rooms I go into are kind of a disappointment. But when it's fun to go out at night, and really at these dinners, we don't even talk about audio at all. I mean, I don't think at that dinner where you're just seeing, that was first course, like 20 dishes that you're ordered from this Lebanese place that was phenomenal. On top of that, mother's milk, that was like 150 proof or whatever.
That was crazy. That
was a fun meal. Quite a long drive. We were like scratching our heads. Yeah, that's desserts. We ordered like one of every
And that was
dessert.
only one table. We had like two tables.
Two tables combined had full courses on there. You know, one thing that was phenomenal, and obviously Weber Grill was phenomenal. The night before, I hung out with Robert and the guys. That was really cool with Kabas and in acoustic and Wilson Benesh. Yeah, the Weber Grill. That's just table. If you can get that table that we've got that looks over there, if you don't mind catching a little bit of heat from that grill, it's kind of fun to watch them cook your meal. And yeah, that's an impressive.
We ate there. I ate there twice, Jason. Didn't you eat there 3 times?
I ate there 3 times. Basically, took an Uber every day.
So good, so good
to go there. The burgers are phenomenal at lunch, and then the steaks at dinner. That was a lot of fun.
And that Lebanese restaurant is Lebanese. Lebanais. Fantastic. It's a little off the beaten path from Schaumburg in Chicago, but thumbs up to them. And big thanks to Edgar. Hooking us up with that reservation. And that was just a special meal. It was one of
it's a restaurant that doesn't take reservations, but because he's Lebanese and they got to know the owner.
That was great.
We got the royal treatment, got a reservation there on a Saturday night. That was phenomenal. Actually, even before that, we haven't talked about, we went briefly to the MBL special event at a local dealership. And that was a very impressive dealer there. The name escapes me right now. It was tough to find it. It was like in a strip mall next to a grocery store even, which is an odd place for a high-end dealer. But when you walked in, very impressive rooms, MBL Extremes. Not many dealers have that on demo. But all the gear in there was great. I wish we could have spent more time in there. But that's a room where the MBLs would shine, certainly the Extremes. But we just didn't have a whole lot of time there. So many fun things we missed, though.
You know what speaker I wish I could have listened to? You remember the Dolly core speakers they had in the main lobby?
We did. We listened to Eminem.
Yeah, so they played some of the really most interesting or more interesting music, but it was stuff like that. They were playing Eminem, they were playing Zeppelin, they were playing Pink Floyd, and people were just sitting there. It was obviously hard to judge those speakers because it was filling an entire lobby, but I would have loved to have heard those kind of dialed in, because from what I heard, I really liked the sound coming out of those speakers.
Yeah, somebody was asking
on
about
a note like that. Listening to those, the Dollies, I had a chance on Sunday. Sunday was a great day, by the way, Doug. It was actually got quiet where you can get into rooms and listen to things and you weren't fighting people. But the Focal, I think those Utopias, that the same ones that were in Tampa, they had them in a different room. And just for fun on Sunday, they were going crazy with them. They turned into full Peppy mode as far as loud as you can imagine. And just with the music they were playing. And they did really well as far as for dynamics and sheer impact. And I was very impressed with them. Yeah.
I wish I didn't have to fly out early. I need to do direct flights. Anytime when there's a direct flight, that's my time to depart. So
gotcha.
I do miss out on the Sunday afternoon stuff, though. I regret that.
It was very, very pleasant. It really was walking around. And,
at the end of the day, I was able to go to in fact, this is one of the questions, some of the flagship rooms. I like to save that for the last day because I was able to go in. I'm a little bit rushed on that last day, but you don't have the noise floor that day 1, day 2, everybody wants to get in those big rooms. And I have to say that almost all of them did a commendable job, that I was able to sit in there, enjoy, every single one. Wilson had a couple of rooms, Wilson speakers that sounded really nice. The Sonos Faber sounded nice. The Scana, I didn't go into that one, but I heard that one was good. I didn't get in the sweet spot for Joseph Audio, but that one I just know is always good. If I had to pick the ones that I went into that were standouts, obviously for me, I like the Estalon Extreme Mark II. And then obviously if you got that upfront seat on the Acoras, we got to go in that before the show even started, Doug and I. And so zero noise floor, dedicated listening session. That's when you really get to hear the speakers and the gear versus noise and everything else you got to kind of factor in.
And the Acora room was terrible. Remember, you clap your hands, you heard all kinds, but that's just an impressive.
And even in that front seat close, you had echo right in there. I was even talking and I could hear, but Again, they are very good at, and that's why I gave them applause in my wrap up, because it's really more about showing how people can adapt to room conditions. Show that if they know how to do that, they probably, it's good anecdotal evidence that they know how to build a speaker too. You know, you got to think of all these things. Not everybody's going to have a perfect room, even when you have mega dollar speakers. Trust me, I go in a lot of these rooms and visit people's homes that have mega dollar speakers, but they still can't have perfect rooms. So having a speaker and setup and the skills that you could call them and ask them for their tips and tricks, you know, and that's why guys like Klaus and now with Bach, with Edgar, you know, it kind of almost takes speaker placement out of that's another side benefit that people don't even realize. You get that 3D sound, but speaker placement now is almost no longer an issue.
Right.
You saw in my videos.
It's a bit of a selfish way to listen, though, but, you know, the way we always listen, the way I've always listened, it's been a solo activity anyway. You know, you look at a company like Orchestral, you know, that family run audio thing there, where what he does is all about family. He has a horizontal array type of speaker system. And his whole methodology and mindset is different, because he wants to be able to have a room of people sitting across on a couch, listening to an orchestra as if they were sitting in front of an orchestra. So each person gets to hear just what they would hear live. And that's what his horizontal, that's why they're set up that way, to be able to distribute that kind of a wide sound to everyone. So everyone gets a part of it. And I mean, that's not for me, you know, but he also had the other type of vertical arrays, which I think I would have liked to have listened to, you know, but he has such a passion for what he does. And, you know, again, like you said, getting to know the people behind the product sometimes, that tells you a lot about what's going on, you know?
Yeah. And like I said, there are some people in this hobby that, you know, unfortunately we have a few that are the snake oil peddlers that aren't really on the up and up. But what I like to showcase and like to see at these shows are how many great people there are behind the brand. Even guys like Dr. Vinyl, Doug and I, he was great down in Tampa. His room was phenomenal. Great guy as well. You want to support these kind of guys. You know, I don't even have a turntable set up, but JR is one of my favorite guys in the hobby. Charles Kiermus with the record cleaning machine. I don't even have records to clean. These are great guys. And we had Rex there with his grounding box. I mean, his sub panel, which actually I've got one now. I got to install in my room. That's going to be a video upcoming soon. Seeing these guys behind the hobby within their disciplines. And then guys like Andrew Jones. Now I feel very privileged to have gotten to interview him twice, get to know him better, get to go to his actual facility. That was such a treat for me last Thursday at his place, 2 hours listening to icons like Steve McCormick and him talk for 2 hours. That was a treat. That's what I think a lot of people overlook. The fun of the shows that we just talked about and getting to know the people behind them is much more important than sweating what you hear in those rooms at that time. None of those rooms are ever going to showcase the gear at its utmost potential. You know, you're just getting a taste of what it could be. And you want to give kudos to ones that get the best, like Klaus does and some of the other ones. But yeah, really the show is much more encompassing than that. And I'm glad y'all focused on a lot of those issues.
Such a big show. I mean, it's huge, you know, it's almost overwhelming because you feel you're not going to be able to see everything, not be able to hear everything. And so I tend to rush. That's what I did my first day and a half. I rushed trying to make it to everything. And then I found myself going back to the rooms I rushed through because I actually wanted to try to enjoy it now. I just wanted to be able to sit back and, you know.
This is not the show though for that, because yeah, you're going to end up having to miss some, like I had to miss a ton. Yeah. And so Seattle's coming up in June. That was an awesome show for attendees. For exhibitors, it wasn't as much traffic, but for attendees, amazing show. And also the home entertainment one that's in LA. Not only do you have the fun of LA, which we just came back from LA, Coachella and all that. That's a whole nother story. Not even going to get into that for this video, but that was insane. But that's going to be in LA. That's another show, small. You can literally in one day get to every room at least once, but then you have the rest of the weekend, or at least day two, to really get to know the people, talk to them, sit in that sweet spot. those are just as important to me as these big shows like Axpona, which give you everything.
I was thinking the Long Beach show was a large show. I didn't know it was small.
Very small. In fact, it'll probably be even smaller this year because Seattle is going to be trying to compete with it in the same month. And it's following up on Munich, which is at the end of May that I'm going to. So you're talking about people having to turn around going to Munich and then LA, then Seattle. They're probably going to choose one or two of those to miss. And most of them don't miss Munich if they can afford to go to that. That's another one. It's a bucket list for me to do. So I'm happy to say I'm going. I got that approved, my press pass and everything. So I'm ready to go. So I'll have plenty of that. Maybe if Doug can come with me, or if you want to go, Dave, start looking at rates.
Certainly a thought.
Okay. Yeah, I got a few people that are going with me. Robert, the guy from Sacramento, my friend in San Francisco who ordered the Essalon Extreme Mark IIs. He's going and he's booked. So, and then I'm visiting in acoustic while I'm there. So we're going to have a lot of material coming up soon.
Cool.
Looking at the chat, see if we have any questions anybody's asking. Clint Eastwood, you must be talking about the Gorillaz video. Yeah, that was phenomenal, guys. Let's just talk about Coachella real quick. It's a pain in the ass to get to. I would not recommend fighting LA traffic during the day. You know, drive in the middle of the night to get to the valley and just stay in a tent or stay wherever in your car. But once you're there, what a bucket list time. Great. If it's a band you like I like the Gorillaz, whoever it is. Bad Bunny is the biggest artist in the world right now. And he came on stage with the Gorillaz. He followed up the Gorillaz on that Friday night. It was just a phenomenal time. But yeah, that's a bucket list moment. And really, the other thing about this hobby, I'm going to see Robert Plant and Alison Krauss tomorrow night in Houston. They had tickets available, so I'm going to see that. And that's what I think is a really overlooked part of the hobby, is that we get ingrained with us listening to the systems all the time, but we don't balance it with listening to live music, whether it's classical, concerts. This gives us a lot more appreciation for, and a lot of times it's not even higher quality at these concerts, but the dynamics, the fun, why you're in this hobby is more evident than ever when you go to these shows, and the adrenaline. It's more about that than nitpicking, little bit of jargon and neurotic listening and hyper listening. This hobby rewards you so much more if you're toe tapping natively without any super concentration, enjoying the music. And that's what you get from going to live shows. And you see just how much different it is live versus, we still haven't got there. Edgar's getting close with the Bach, certainly much closer than we've ever got before. But there's nothing like going to a show live, being around other people. Just like
you just have to have 10 people in front of you with their cell phones in front of your face. You get the whole experience.
Well, speaking of which, I filmed the entire Gorillaz show with a GoPro headband attachment on there. I haven't released that video yet, but I've got the entire show GoPro'd so that I could enjoy the concert without having to deal with holding a cell phone.
Well, the Robert Plant, Alison Krauss, I saw them at Jazz Fest. Gosh, it must have been 10 or 12 years ago. And that was one of the more memorable moments when they broke into the Battle of Evermore together. It was just gorgeous. And the hairs on the back of my neck stood up. And I remember that. You get little moments of time that are special musical moments, but that was one of them. So hopefully they're still singing that. And I'm sure that it's going to sound fantastic.
Yeah, well, Robert Plant's getting up there in age, so the thought process was, this may be one of the last times to see him, in concert. So I've never seen them, so I've heard these stories that you've told. So looking forward to that as well. Anything else? Let me see. Any other questions out there? There was a question about panels and subs. We kind of talked about the KLH9. Dave, you've got you have open baffle and sub towers right behind you.
That's right.
But the KLH9 is kind of similar in terms of line source for both the bass drivers, matching Pistonic drivers where Pistonic drivers make more sense in the bass, and then electrostatic for full range, mid range, and tweeter. You've got more of the planar, kind of like mine. So there's a lot out there that are going more open baffle. For a while there, I was uploading videos and realizing I was uploading lots of open baffle rooms at the show. Lots of rooms now having DSP included, including Cabas. That to me, again, Michael has a question up here. We wanted more about Cabas. Like I said, that the reference speaker that they have that we heard last year, that to me is what I would buy if I had to go with a point source box speaker. No question, I'd buy that one. Not only for the cool factor, it's badass looking, but the electronics are in the base, which make it so form factor perfect. Let me see if I even have a picture here I can share. That show last year.
Jason, was it one of the spherical Cabas's or the regular box?
It was the spherical. Let's see.
Yeah, because the electronics are in the stand, right, or at the base of it.
Yeah. Let's see here. Can you see that?
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah. So this one here is not even their full reference, but that's the one I heard last year. And if you look at the base, it has the electronics are in the base. Now that look is going to be polarizing. Certainly, wife acceptance factor may be an issue. I think it's badass.
I love it. I love it.
But more importantly, the sound quality.
Yeah, exactly.
It's the war of the world, but it is so badass. And yeah, a cube structure is so advantageous in many ways, just difficult to make. So that's why you don't see it that often. But man, that's a killer brand, killer speaker.
I remember those from last year too. They're stunning. The power they can put out.
Yeah,
you know, the impact and
then they haven't even brought their mega sphere yet. I've seen that and heard that way back in the day. Maybe in Munich. I will be looking out for that in Munich. See if I can see that. So yeah, we're over an hour now, so I won't let y'all go. I know you got work in the morning and all that fun stuff, but appreciate you joining. Anything else y'all wanted to wrap up with?
Just one thing, just want to say, I spent a good part of a day listening to all kinds of open baffle stuff. And, you know, there's so simplicity in design. And I just like the open nature, the disappearing act, everything that they do. And then I went into the room and there was the small Acora, the SRC-1. And immediately that little guy did the same thing, completely disappeared, yet with a stronger foundation and the imaging and everything about it. That's a killer speaker.
That's my favorite in terms of what I would recommend to people. Your value equation, the looks of that stand, I think are killer. The other ones are going to be more polarizing to people either loving it or hating it. But I don't see anybody not liking that bookshelf with that stand. It's so badass.
Well, the SRC-1's not the bookshelf. It's the one.
Okay.
It's their floor stander. Yeah, the baby floor stander.
Yeah, and Ryan just got the next one up from that. Those are, they have them up in at 3MA. No, that's what they were using in these rooms that are just as large, where they're using the VRC ones. They were using those in the same room. And so, those are fully capable. But the obelisk's shape, I love it, but I can see where people, you know, it doesn't have the artistic factor of like the Estalon Extremes, you know, that'll cross over life acceptance factor as much, but I think they look badass. But stand mount auras, and you pair that with a sub, who knows? I think maybe Val will do a sub in the future, matching sub.
Well, the whole distributed base array idea. I mean, more and more, it just seems to make sense to me.
I agree. Yeah.
If I was going to start all over again, if I had to start all over, that might be right where I start. Start with the base.
Let me give you a little bit of spoiler alert. We're going to be going to Doug's house. Doug bought a Dolman turntable, DS Audio, Kuzma, ARM cartridge combo, a Bach, and JR's coming out to help set that up, as well as do measurements like you did at my house, and maybe do the distributed base array instead of the REL 25. He can't do 4 REL 25s in that room.
He asked me if I could get 4 subs, like not 4 REL 25s. I don't think I can fit those in my house.
So but it's either maybe keep the REL and add 3 more, or, you know, pivot. You know, I think you're buying the Cabas as well, right, Doug?
I'm going to, yeah, but that's not going to be from my my room here.
Yeah, but you may want to put the REL 25 with another system of yours, and then you could do the distributed base array.
That's a thought, but that's a big
That's a big
subwoofer. It took two ex-LSU football players to move that up.
Move that.
My
You have an elevator in your house. Like, if you didn't have an elevator, that would have been crazy.
Whew. Yeah.
So that's going to be a fun trip. We're going to come down to your place. So Dave, you're going to want to come down to Doug's house that time. At some point, I'll get to your place.
Yeah, I'm only about hour 15 minutes from Doug, so it's not that far.
Okay, so where you live, do they have cars and
Oh, yes, they do.
Okay, I didn't know if I have to Uber a horse buggy or something down there. I know I don't have to wear socks and shoes down there,
Yeah, like on Green Acres, it's still flying to Zeppelins. Yeah.
All right, guys. Well, thanks again for joining. I think everybody will appreciate, all three people that watched can appreciate your feedback.
Well, thanks, Jace. Y'all have a good night.
All right. Take care, guys.
Yep. You guys too.
Good night.